Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's a Ukrainian show on Pod TV. My name is Sasha Star, and today we have Dr. Jonathan Lockwood. Welcome to the show, Jonathan.
Thank you, Sasha. Glad to be here as always.
Glad to see you. And our man in Kiev, Ivan Kucherenko. Welcome to the show, Ivan.
Hello, Sasha. Hello, Jonathan. Glad to be here today.
Hello. So after a long absence of this show in the last 2 weeks, we are back. And what is noticeable, first of all, it's a change of tactics of Russia and Putin towards Ukraine. They realized that they cannot succeed on the front lines. They even if they are taking a little bit of territory here and there, they're losing about 1,500 men a day, and that's not something Putin can afford anymore. He just can't. So instead, he completely redirected his strategy to terror strategy, to kill innocent Ukrainian people, children, elderly people, women, and destroying infrastructure. And guess what? Unfortunately, Trump is helping Putin to do that by informing Zelensky that he just had a telephone call with Putin, and Putin said that there will be no more attacks. So Zelensky goes to Ukrainian people, telling them that I've just got a message from Donald Trump. There will be no more attacks against civilian and infrastructure targets. And so we can be absolutely hopeful that it's not going to happen. And let's relax a little bit. And guess what's happening next? Brutal attacks against all Ukrainian structures and infrastructure and residential buildings, and just name it. So imagine that Trump wouldn't call to Zelensky, wouldn't inform him of that. Zelensky wouldn't inform Ukrainian people of that situation. So everything would be as normal, ready for Russian attacks as they were before, and this is what's happening right now. Furthermore, it came to my attention that when people are talking about the peace negotiations, there is a meeting over here and over there, and this next meeting is coming in 3 days, there's another one in 2 days, and it's going to be in Abu Dhabi, in Ankara, or somewhere in Turkey, or somewhere else, somewhere here, somewhere there. So it's a show. It's a magnificent show, but people are forgetting, and I'll remind everybody who are listening to this program, there are 3 tracks of negotiations. No, it's a nonsense. Only one track is negotiations about peace, and it's not moving anywhere. It's stuck. But use it as a cover. You have 2 other tracks which are doing so much better than this one. One is establishment or re-establishment of relationship between Russia and US, having embassies, having the trade posts, having the airlines flying back and forth between Washington or New York and Moscow, or so on. That's one track. And another track is nothing to do with United States. It's Trump's personal willing and dealing for his family and his friends with Putin and his family, how to carve Russian assets and just get them into their private hands. So 3 tracks. So when we're talking about negotiations, be very specific. What exactly are you talking about? Because if you're talking about peace negotiations, forget it. There will be no peace, no negotiation. But because Zelensky cannot pull himself out because of the wrath of Trump. So he has to pretend, oh, we have meeting over here and over there, and we will send this team and that team and here and there. He knows that there will be no prospects of peace whatsoever, but he must play the game. However, what's happening right now on the international front, they are meetings of all over the world, in Europe, in Norway, UK, with Japan, and previously with China. The world will be very soon very different place, where America will be get out of all trade, all the businesses, purchases of F-35 and other American hardware will stop immediately. Canada already stopped that. And so the world is changing a lot. And in that situation, I'm wondering how prudent is Zelensky's helping Trump to have his other tracks going on, particularly there are peaceful negotiations and there is a big progress being made. So, Ivan, what do you think about that?
Yeah,
Your turn with
thank
your
you.
turn with grenade.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Sasha. And yeah, Ukraine currently is in a very difficult situation because we have to go on those negotiations with Russia when they are completely not ready to stop this war, and they are not willing to end this war, and even that 1 week so-called ceasefire when they
2 days.
promised Trump not to attack Ukrainian energy infrastructure. It actually lasted for 2 days because it was announced on Friday, and actually before that there were attacks on energy infrastructure of some border Ukrainian cities, and this night it was a huge massive attack on Kyiv with a lot of ballistic missiles, with the cruise missiles, with more than 400 drones, and the major targets for Russians were the heat-producing facilities, and now in Kyiv is like minus 25 degrees by Celsius. It's like minus 13 in Fahrenheit, and a lot of my friends and colleagues who are living in Kyiv in multi-store apartment buildings, they actually left without any heating in their apartments, in their flats. It's like 8 or 10 degrees of Celsius, and it's actually very cold. So Russia is not going to stop their invasion. They are ready to stop it, but they want to get all the benefits they can, including the whole territory of Donbass. And Ukraine have actually to continue those negotiations, which are which makes no sense in only one reason: not to anger Donald Trump, to keep him in this peace process, to keep United States supplying Ukraine with weapons, which European countries are now paying for, and to keep supplying Ukraine with intelligence data. And with all those peaceful talks, the one major point where there is no compromise is about Donbass. And in our previous programs, we've discussed why Ukraine cannot leave Donbass, actually, because it's very important from the military position, from the defense position, especially the city of Slovyansk, which Ukraine liberated during the first stage of Russian invasion in 2014, and it was a great defeat for Russian proxy troops because they had to leave the Slovyansk city. But Donbass is not only about military importance and defense importance for Ukraine. It's also about cultural importance, importance for people who live in there. And I've got a video for today for us to look why Donbass is not just a piece of territory, which according to Steven Vitkov, Ukraine can just give to Russia because Russia wants to get it, and it's not only about that. So let's watch this video to discover a little bit more about Donbass.
It was a clay factory. We were about 12 kilometers from the Russian front line there. This is kind of far west of Druzhkivka. And I was looking around and I just saw massive industry completely destroyed by Russian rockets. The Donbass has been a place of unbelievable industry with the steep hills, with clay. Since the 18th century, there were 30 different ethnic tribes in that area, 60% of them Ukrainian, that produced beautiful porcelain that was shipped all around Europe and all around the world. And Ukrainians developed the Donbass. It was temporarily occupied and industrialized by the Soviet Union, but the Ukrainians have been there far before Moscow existed. There have been artifacts found under Konstantinivka that date back to the 5th century, showing that there were settlements there, warriors there, tribes there. Some of the earliest Slavic tribes in the Donbass that are now the ancestors of modern-day Ukrainians that date way back before Moscow. It's unbelievably rich in its history, its culture, its heritage, generations of people who have refined their trade, whose entire families have relied on these hills, the salt mines, and it's beautiful, the sunsets that I filmed. I really wanted to showcase that. And the only comparison I can think of is anyone that's grown up on the Dust Belt of the United States or the Welsh mining towns, these beautiful, visceral towns all across the world who have accents and history and who, through generations, have become excellent at their trade. And the Donbass is an industrial heartland of Ukraine, and some of the most beautiful porcelain that's been designed and painted all across Lviv with all of these artists, it came from the Donbass. So it's steeped in history. And the idea that it is Russian is the most ridiculous propaganda. And that's what I wanted to show in this film, because it's a really almost biblical place. There are rare animals. There are snakes and vipers in that region that are almost extinct in the rest of the world, that are in the Red Book of Ukraine. There's so much history and art and just beauty there. And the idea that all of that could disappear, that these places could no longer be accessible, is obscene. The entire region should be a UNESCO site. It's got some of the most amazing history of Europe right underneath its soil. And if Russia takes it, all of that art, all of that trade, all of that generations of skill will disappear back into the soil. And that's what this is about. Again, when politicians on TV talk about battle lines, when they talk about the Donbass as just a map, and they talk about it as just land, this is what it's really about. It's a place, a real place that is significant, of cultural significance. And that is why people don't want to leave. That's why people get evacuated only at the last second. Because why would you leave a place where your ancestors mined the ground for generations? Not until you absolutely have to. And that's what it really is. That's the spirit of the Donbass.
That is very telling.
Very good video. By the way, speaking about this Zelensky's strategies, sending people on this negotiations, so-called, not to upset Trump. Why Zelensky wouldn't say that he would love to continue these negotiations, but with the situation in the country, they don't have funds to send people all over the world, staying in the hotel, paying for airfare, and so on. We just simply can't do it. We'd love to do it, but we can't, because right now we have several problems to take care of. Jonathan, the question to you is, if Ukraine got $92 billion so far from European Union, and the way I see and I've on this meeting right now in Norway, where all European countries support Ukraine 100%, and they're sending the arms, weapons, and so on, why why Ukraine is so timed at clinging for Trump, who is not helping Ukraine, not at all, and where Trump is being ostracized in the rest of the world, and even by maybe even majority of American people. Look at this latest polls where showed Trump's supports 36% or so, or whatever. So the changes are coming. Is that so important for Ukraine to pretend that they are participating in this peace talk and so on? Because if without that peace talks, their other two tracks becoming meaningless at all.
Well, I would say that Zelensky, based on all appearances that I see, he's continuing to engage in this diplomatic, I call it a kabuki dance, ceremonial, mostly for appearances. And he and the Ukrainian military are simply biding their time. They're continuing to wear down the Russian military, the track that I would say counts the most at this point. And they are continuing to reduce Russia's ability to engage in offensive operations. They're continuing to damage Russia's infrastructure. They're retaliating. They recognize the morale of the Ukrainian people is clearly not broken by any stretch of the imagination. And so what they are doing is they are biding their time, gathering more support from the European Union, gathering more financial support, diplomatic support, military arms and supplies. And what I see, just based on the pattern of military operations that I've observed so far, is that they are preparing for a spring counteroffensive. They are preparing for a spring counteroffensive, a decisive counterpunch, as I've contended on previous programs. They are the overall correlation of forces, as the Soviets used to like to call it, is continuing to shift in favor of Ukraine. So all of this tells me that the Ukrainians are simply diplomatically biding their time, engaging in diplomatic maneuvers, going through all the ceremony, and hopefully behind the scenes, which we cannot see really, hopefully behind the scenes, they are attempting to persuade President Trump that they have the situation in hand, that they have more cards than the United States thinks, or that President Trump thinks. He was saying, you don't have any cards. He was saying a number of months ago, you don't have any cards. And Zelensky was quite well aware, oh, yes, I do. And he played them quite well. So now you have the Ukrainians are talking about establishing a goal for inflicting casualties on the Russians to something like 50,000 a month, I believe it is. And based on the way that they're developing their drones and executing their attacks, they recently executed another successful attack on the Kerch Bridge, which is putting it on the verge of collapse. And while what people are not aware of is that the collapse of that bridge would virtually assure the supply and reinforcement isolation of the Russian occupiers in the Crimea. So I contend that and oh, by the way, any talk of so-called polls, they're saying that President Trump is at his weakest, and all these other political observations. Let me point out just one thing: if conventional wisdom and polls and conventional wisdom were anywhere near close to accurate, reliable, or consistent, Hillary Clinton would have been elected president in 2016. Because the pressers all say, oh, Hillary Clinton has a 99% chance of being elected president, until she wasn't. So polls can be very volatile. They can be manipulated. They can be selectively presented by one side or the other. So I always take polls or declarations of political weakness, not just with a grain of salt. I take it with a whole bag full of salt, and toss it over my shoulder. So like I say, political situations tend to change from month to month. So the military situation to me is very consistent.
You're absolutely right. And you see, with the Europeans and the rest of the world are getting more and more hostile to Trump, and Zelensky continues to pretend that he's working with Trump and participating in all these dances. Say, don't you be afraid that Zelensky may alienate Europeans against Ukraine by siding with only Donald Trump. Ivan, what do you think about that?
I think that Europeans at last understood the real situation with this war, and that Ukraine actually is the only country which are preventing Russia from further aggression over European countries. So European partners are understand Ukrainian positions by default, and of course they do not want Ukraine to give up territories, because Europe had the same case with Nazi Germany just before the start of the Second World War, when Hitler was awarded by territories in order in exchange of his promise not to grab other territories and to stop expanding his Third Reich Empire. Looks like similar what is Putin talking about. He says, okay, give me Donbass, give me all Donbass, we will sign the peace treaty with the Ukraine, and I will not go any further. I will not attack Europe. I will not attack Ukraine anymore. But first of all, we've heard that half century ago from Hitler. He said the same things when he was awarded by of Sudet region of Czechoslovakia.
And don't forget Budapest Memorandum, by the way.
Yeah, don't forget Budapest Memorandum. And coming to more, okay, Budapest Memorandum was not signed by Putin. It was signed by Yeltsin, and but just remember what Putin said in 2014 when Russia invaded Crimea. It's not Russia. There are some green men there. It's not Russia. It's not Russia. There are no Russian troops. Then he awarded Russian troops participated in annexation of Crimea and made Crimea official part of Russia. When he invaded the eastern part of Ukraine, he said, no, it's just no Russian troop there. It's just Donbas miners who decided to become independent from Kiev regime because of that revolution of dignity, and Yanukovych left Ukraine, and Donbas decided to be independent. No. And when Russian troops directly attacked Ukrainian forces in Ilovaisk, when they actually crossed the border, and all Ukrainian soldiers who were in that encirclement seen that it were regular Russian troops. He said, no, there were Russian troops there. And just before the full-scale invasion to Ukraine, there were those military procedures on the Ukrainian borders. Putin said, no, we will never invade Ukraine. No, we are not going to invade Ukraine. No. He said that, and we've seen what words of Putin are actually worse of. They're worse of nothing. And just a couple days ago, Putin spokesperson, that Peskov, said that President Trump asked Putin not to attack Ukrainian energy infrastructure because in Ukraine are severe colds, severe frost right now, and President Putin agreed. And what we've seen, he attacked Ukrainian energy infrastructure. Unfortunately, I just want to recall words of Winston Churchill which he said in the beginning of the Second World War, that you cannot commit any negotiations with a lion until you have a head in his mouth. And currently, unfortunately, Russia is not a lion, but it's a bear, a drunken bear, but it's still powerful, though they're not advancing a lot in Ukraine. In January, according to the latest data from the Ukrainian official command, Russia lost the same number of soldiers like they lost in December, but they were able to grab twice less territories than they were able to capture in December or in November. So their advancing is slowing down, but they are continue to pay a great price for every square mile of Ukrainian territory. And according to the analyst estimations, Russia will be ready for the real peaceful negotiations in March or in April, when they will face the necessity to refill the number of their soldiers and to announce the full scale mobilization in Russia, because the number of those who are signing their contracts, paid contracts, is decreasing with a really great speed. And the second point of leverage on their decision to commit a real peace negotiations is the economic problem in Russia. The inflation rate in Russia in January is really high, higher than even on the start of the full-scale invasion. They were managed to raise taxes. So they've increased the VAT in Russia, and I think that the possible collapse of Russian economy will make Putin to go on more negotiable positions. And the real goal of Ukrainian team who are taking part in those negotiations is to continue them and not to give up our positions, not to give up the Ukrainian territories, not to give up the Donbass. And according to the social research, according to the opinion of a majority of Ukrainians, is still to continue this war as long as needed. Like 65% of Ukrainians are completely against giving up Donbass to Russia, and like 40% are about 40% are really okay with such possible scenario.
Jonathan, I would like to ask you a question. The fact that Ukraine now has finances in place, a lot of ammunition and weapons of all kinds, yet it refrains from attacking Crimea or actually anywhere else. Don't you think that there was some kind of an agreement with Trump that Ukraine will abide by the negotiations or so on, and while negotiations are in place, they are not going to attack Russian positions anywhere to allow the negotiations to take its course? Now, if that's the case, then it's becoming a strange war where Ukraine now is getting upside on the front lines. It has all possibilities to attack, if not in Crimea, just in many other places. Yet it's not doing that. How would you see it?
I see that, again, like I've been contending before, Ukrainians, both politically, diplomatically, they are biding their time. They are building their strength because when Ukraine decides to launch its counteroffensive, it has to be done in such a way that you have the maximum chance of success. You have the maximum chance of breaking through the Crimean defenses, of cutting off. Remember that attack on the Kerch Bridge? that is one step closer to being able to completely isolate the Crimea. Once the Ukrainians are as certain as they can be that their next series of attacks will, one, collapse and completely destroy Crimean air defenses. Number two, achieve the destruction of the Kerch Bridge and be able to successfully isolate Crimea from Russian reinforcement or supply. And then three, when they when their military leaders have determined that whatever forces, whatever strategic reserves that Ukraine has earmarked for a counteroffensive into Crimea to retake the Crimea once it has been isolated and the air defense is reduced, once all those are in place, and Ukraine and Zelensky, along with his military leaders, feel that the time is right, most likely the earliest that could occur would be in the spring, maybe as early as March. Once all those are in place, then timing is everything in this situation. You don't want to launch a counteroffensive, for example, as the Ukrainians did, I believe in 2023. They attempted to launch a counteroffensive, and it was premature. The Russians had their defenses set up; they were still capable of conducting defense, and they were able to limit Ukrainian gains in their counteroffensive. But this time, now that the Ukrainians have massive production of drones, they're inflicting very heavy casualties on the Russians, continuing to do so, and all of the prerequisites are being established for a success from where I'm looking at it, for a successful counteroffensive at the right time. And the economic factors are supporting this scenario. The destruction of Russia's defense industry is supporting it. And so what Zelensky is doing publicly, he is saying, "Oh yes, I agree. Yeah, the peace process is going fine. Yeah, we're engaging in all this diplomatic dancing." All the while, they're preparing the decisive counterpunch. And if they launch that counteroffensive, it can't be a counteroffensive just to say, "Oh, we're launching a counteroffensive." No, it has to be a counteroffensive that is a decisive knockout blow, that one that retakes the Crimea, and that's what will be watching for very carefully in the March-April time period of this year.
Jonathan, I would like to add something that when you mentioned that in their offensive in 2023, Ukrainians were premature and not ready. In my recollection, that they were actually late. If they would start that offensive much earlier after their success at the end of 22, they would do much better because Russians were able to build.
Of course, but Ukraine couldn't start earlier. We were lacking weapons and ammo, and even till the start of that offensive in 2023, some weapon shipments promised by Western partners, including United States, were delayed. We received Abrams tanks just in autumn of 2023 when that counteroffensive was already in progress. And I just wanted to add, Jonathan, I completely agree with your words, that I hope that the preparations of this counteroffensive will be carried out in a complete silence, and our partners, including the United States, will not be notified about that because
you don't tip your hand in advance. No.
Yeah, our experience shows that
apologize later.
Ukraine is successful when
we can notify Americans that during 2026 we are planning certain attacks around maybe Crimea, maybe some other places.
In this case, we have a saying: "It is easier to beg forgiveness than to ask permission."
That's right, absolutely. And Ivan, so sorry I interrupted you. Would you continue, please?
Yeah. That was my opinion, because just to remember, like the plans about Ukrainian counteroffenses in 2023 were well known to Russia. They leaked from the United States military department, thanks to that soldier of National Guard soldier who published them on the internet, all the intelligence data about preparation of Ukrainian brigades for the counteroffense. And when Ukraine launched the successful Kursk operation, when Ukraine later it didn't notify our military command didn't notify our partners about it. We just said that we're planning something. So I hope that this year will be the same situation. And when Ukraine plans such operations in a complete secrecy, we can see really great results, like the Spiderweb operation, and many other successful Ukrainian operations. So I really want to discover that operation was launched from the news media, not from Donald Trump, or not from President Zelensky, and not from
John,
But
the
we-
question.
better off to discover about it from Russian news media, because actually when
Yeah.
Kursk operation launched, there were a complete silence in Ukrainian news media. Nobody published nothing about it, and Ukrainians got all the news about that operation from Russian news media, which were really panicked about something is going.
That's when you
on
that's when
the
you know that's when you
motherland.
know you really hit them hard.
Yeah.
I agree
I'd like
there.
to ask you, Jonathan, very important question. It's a little bit coming back to where we started today and to your last statement. If I'm right, or at least the information what I follow is right, so Putin decided to stop bleeding on the front lines and have sort of like a status quo for the time being, and continue this murderous terrorist attacks against civilian population, while Ukraine is biding its time and pretending to participate in all these negotiations and preparing possible attack against Russians around Crimea or any other targets. How Ukraine can neutralize this Russians' murderous terrorist attacks? What Ukraine can do about it?
Well, yeah, I will use a boxing analogy here. Remember the fight between Muhammad Ali and George Foreman back in 1974? George Foreman was favored in that fight because George Foreman was a very powerful puncher who had the ability to knock out his opponents in very short order.
He was crushing everybody before Muhammad Ali. He was crushing. He was like Tyson.
Yeah, exactly. And so he was crushing opponents, but he did not have very good endurance. He did not have the ability to pace himself properly for a long fight. And Muhammad Ali, leaning up against the ropes, basically just let George Foreman just pound away at him on the ropes. And Muhammad Ali could take a punch to the body and so forth. And Foreman exhausted himself after about 6 or 7 rounds. In the 8th round, when Foreman came out and he threw a punch at Ali, and Muhammad said to him, "Is that all you've got left?" And he came off the ropes and just counterattacked and knocked him out in the 8th round. And so that is the analogy I use here. The Ukrainians are taking a fair amount of punishment, but they are also using their drones as a shield. They are counterattacking with drones. They're counterattacking with missiles, deep strikes, and they are steadily wearing down the Russian ability to attack and inflict damage. Russians are simply trying to achieve through terror and just indiscriminate attacks against the civilian population in much the same way that Nazi Germany tried in World War II when their air offensive in the Battle of Britain failed. They kept up their attacks at night. They were using night bombing attacks in an attempt to wear down the morale of the British people. They also used their so-called vengeance weapons, the V1 and the V1 buzz bombs and the V2 rockets. They were not designed to achieve any kind of military objective because they did not have the ability to see where their missiles and V1s were going. They were simply launching them in the direction of England, hoping to hit some kind of civilian target, inflict damage. That's why they were called vengeance weapons. So right now we have a similar analogy here. The Russians are right now, they are like a boxer who is weakening but flailing away at his opponent in a desperate attempt to somehow score a damaging enough blow or series of blows that will break the morale of the Ukrainian people. And the Ukrainians are having none of it. They are taking proper countermeasures. They're using their drones most effectively. They're counterattacking the Russians in ways where it hurts them. And they're bringing the war home to the Russian people. All of these things, their cumulative effect will be to reduce the Russian will to fight and ability to fight. And once that has occurred, then the Russians will, to look at it from a Clausewitz point of view, they will have reached their culminating point where they can no longer continue the offensive. And then that is the opportunity for the defender to launch a decisive counteroffensive, in Clausewitz's view.
Remember, we discussed a few months ago, and more than once, that essentially Russia is thriving on a war of attrition, and because it's much bigger country and much bigger the weapons and so on, that would be very dangerous for Ukraine. But I've noticed lately that the war of attrition now, speaking about Russian economy falling apart, it favors Ukraine much more than Russia. The war of attrition, if somehow we could figure out how to save Ukrainian population from this murderous terrorist attacks, that would be very helpful. But I think Ukrainians are doing something right, because I've noticed that with all these attacks, the number of casualties is getting less and less and less. Unfortunately, there are still casualties. There's no doubt about that. But the number
yeah, and more of casualties in Russian, and I like the goal which new Ukrainian Minister of Defense Mikhailo Fedorov mentioned, that his goal is to arrange Ukrainian defenders to kill more than 50,000 of Russians per month, and with such level of casualties, Russia will have to stop their invasion. I'm not sure that it will work, actually, because if we remember the idea of Valery Zaluzhny, when he was chief commander of Ukrainian forces, was then when Russia will reach like 100,000 of casualties, they will stop their invasion, because it's a great number of casualties for a war, and it's like 10 times more than Russia lost in war in Afghanistan, and such level of casualties will make Russia stop this war. And now we see more than 1 million of casualties, and Valery Zaluzhny after that admitted that he was wrong, and that the present Russian government, they are not at all considering with losing life of their population, especially when mostly they're throwing to that meat grinder the population which is not of really great quality, like unemployed persons, like some drunkies, prisoners, and some
donkeys.
labor.
Don't forget donkeys.
Donkeys. The quality's not
labor
gonna get any better.
workers from Central Asian countries and all that stuff, and the number of actually citizens of Moscow or of St. Petersburg in the Russian casualties is pretty low, but the number of some far Russian villages is huge. I've seen recently in media that in one Russian village in Siberia, on a memory note on the wall of the school of that village, the number of soldiers lost, which that village lost in different wars, like in their so-called special military operation, overcome the number of citizens of that village which they lost during the Second World War. Like the list of losses from that village in Putin's war now is more than that village lost during the Second World War.
It's a horrible statistics by all means. And by the way, these Central Asian countries, specifically Kazakhstan, they are now aggressively criticizing Putin and his policies, and they just voiced out their opinions that they don't have to do anything with this horrible aggression. And they're absolutely right, because they can turn this aggression against any of these countries, like Kazakhstan and many others. But now, right now, Russia is so busy with this war of attrition. It's more and more looks to me like a war of attrition. But this time, Ukraine has an advantage in this war, not Russia. Russia's economy is falling apart. And it seems to me that beyond 2026, and I'm not even sure whether they will last until the end of the year, but sometime during this year, Russia will collapse. They just will not be able to continue the war. They would not be able to continue mobilize people. Actually, 50,000 a month is a very critical number, because they can recruit maximum 30,000 a month. So if they recruit 30 and getting killed 50, this math cannot go.
They won't even be able, Sasha, they won't even be able to reallocate forces on their own line to create an offensive opportunity on another line, because that rate of loss, they will have critical weaknesses trying to hold their own present positions. And this will, again, that factor also will create a greater opportunity for the successful execution of a Ukrainian counteroffensive in March, April. It just makes it all the more likely to succeed. So right now, both patience and preparation are paramount here in enabling Ukraine to execute a successful and decisive counteroffensive, which will bring an end, which will set the stage for a political armistice. Then they'll all be shocked into reality by the success of Ukrainian military operations and the consequences for the Russian state itself once they are forced to make peace. And those military forces, such as they are, have to return home. The political consequences and economic consequences for Russia will be severe in the post-war period.
I would like to mention that if you're right, John, then hopefully Ukraine will get this offensive March, April, or even May, and wrestle Crimea from the Russian hands. The consequences of that will be that I'm pretty sure Russia will be left to negotiate with Ukraine. It will fall apart on several territories, I'd say 6 to 8 territories, and one of those territories will become Chinese territory, because all the cities like Vladivostok, Khabarovsk, they already have Chinese names, and they are conducting.
The Chinese are already redrawing the maps and said, "Okay, this is ours, and this is ours, and this is ours." Thank you, Vladimir.
They've actually started to do it in 2022 II when they've discovered
Yes,
when
you're
Russia
right.
discovered that their blitzkrieg failed, and Chinese are smart enough to understand where this war of attrition will lead Russia to. So they're definitely drawing new cards and new maps. And the point is that this scenario, which Sasha you are talking about, is a real nightmare for United States, for a lot of European countries, because they are afraid of United States are afraid of empowering China with Russian resources and Russian territories, but they will have no choice actually, because now Russia is making China more powerful by selling their oil to China, supplying oil and gas and other natural resources to China by very cheap prices, because not a lot of countries want to trade with Russia, and they've lost all European countries, and Russia is paying back China to get the goods from there, the electronic components, in order for them to build more and more missiles, because there was investigation that the majority of electronic components now in Russian ballistic missiles are Chinese. In Russian Shahed drones are Chinese. Of course, there are still electronic components from American companies, from European companies, which Russia receives thanks to their so-called shadow import program. But the majority now is Chinese, and the majority of equipment which Russia uses to produce weapons is now Chinese. Before that, they've bought that equipment from Germany, like heavy machinery from Germany, which creates really good heavy machinery equipment. But because of tax sanctions, they were not able to maintenance them and to buy new equipment, and they've switched to Chinese, and it's not as perfect as the German one, but good enough for Russia to produce more and more weapons. But I just wanted to add, Sasha, to what you told about a war of attrition, and that Russia is being economically weaker in this war. Not only economically, because Russia is losing a great number of weapons, of military equipment, which they actually cannot reproduce, cannot rebuild. Their number of armored personal vehicles is decreasing very fast. They're not able to produce them in such numbers which they're losing on the battlefield. That's why
More
obviously they're using donkeys, they're
donkeys.
using civilian cars, golf cars, bicycles, and all that, bikes and all that stuff. They're using air defense systems, actually, when they can be supplied by Shahed drones, by ballistic missiles from North Korea, by ammo from North Korea or from Iran. No any country cannot supply Russia with air defense systems, because all those countries, they are using Russian or Soviet produced air defense systems, and Russia is getting a lack of air defense systems. That's why they obviously cannot cover their oil refining infrastructure, and which Ukraine was successfully in destroying. They cannot cover their harbors. They cannot protect their fleet in Novorossiysk, in Caspian Sea, and they only have enough air defense systems to cover Putin residents and to cover Moscow, to make them really tough goals for Ukrainian
It's a
strikes
perception.
to.
I don't think that
Yeah.
the air defenses are there good. And by the way, they're losing a completely international market for their air defenses, because even countries like Turkey that purchased C-300, C-400, they're asking Russians to take them all back because of to get this metal.
We see how well your air defense systems work against Ukraine.
Russia
What
will
about
happily
Venezuela?
get them back.
Venezuela had
Uh,
Russian air defense.
Russia will happily get them back because they need your defense
All they can get.
systems, and in great need of air defense systems in order to cover the Putin residence, for it not to be attacked by some kind of mythical drones.
Listen, I'm very optimistic at this point that as long as the Ukrainian casualties are getting down to a minimum, I'm not saying zero, which would be perfect, but nothing is perfect in this world, then Ukraine can withstand the war of attrition and take over slowly, because remember, all world, Western Europe particularly, are on the side of Ukraine, and Russia has this pathetic allies like North Korea. China, which is hiding. North Korea openly supports Russia. China is hiding here and there through third parties, through Iran, through some other ways. And why? Because there is a planned meeting in April between Emperor Xi and Donald Trump, and China wants to look like, well, we are not really helping, well, we are doing a little bit, but we are against the war, we are a peaceful nation, and so on. Right?
The usual diplomatic dance.
The usual bullshit, yeah, okay. But it's important. So this meeting is looming. It's February, so let's see, 2 months from now. So China will be very, very careful, at least during this 2 months.
And I might point out that if the successful Ukrainian counteroffensive takes place before April, before that meeting between President Trump and President Xi, that this will have a decisive effect on what China is likely to tell President Trump. He says, we have nothing to do. They may well decide, especially if the Ukrainians succeed in retaking Crimea from Russian control, that says, we'll support anything you have to say, Mr. President. We're not involved in this at all. We're backing out. And the Chinese will be concentrating on recovering Russian territories that were formerly Chinese. That is what they will be positioning themselves for. So much rides on the success, the timing, and ultimate success of the Ukrainian counteroffensive in the spring. Yeah, my betting money, such as it is, would be in that March-April time period. Weather clears, and the Russians continue to weaken at the rate that they are weakening, that there is a decisive opportunity. And you notice that you also notice that the Western military analysts, all the other Western military analysts, are not talking about a potential for a successful Ukrainian counteroffensive. They're saying, the Russians aren't making progress, but the Ukrainians won't be able to recover lost Ukrainian territories. And I'm saying, not from this standpoint. They are at the rate that they are weakening. The opportunity is growing for a successful Ukrainian counteroffensive that will put an effective end to this war, probably by means of armistice, a de facto peace. It may be like the peace between North Korea and South Korea. They're not at war. Well, technically they are still in a state of war, but North Korea is in no position to be attacking South Korea. So right now, and Ukraine is approaching that too.
The major effect of North Korea joining USSR at the time, and South Korea going the Western way. The major effect is that South Koreans are on average about 20 centimeters higher than North Koreans. This is the major
better diet, better food.
Absolutely.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing what same nations before 1949. It was same country, same nation, same people. No, no longer. So, listen, with all that, I would like to thank you very, very much for today's program. And I think we had a good time after all. So hopefully we'll have more good time on Friday, and hopefully you will all be able to make it, and we will have more positive news.
At the
Thank
rate
you.
at the rate it's
Bravo.
going, it's great.
Yeah.
God bless America.
Yeah.
Over
God
to you.
bless Ukraine, America, Canada, and all other friendly countries and territories.
Except
Bye-bye.
Russia.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Fine.
I notice we're kind of leaving Russia out of the Ukraine as right now. God has already formed His own opinion of Russia. So and God's justice is being displayed in this war. We're not looking
And
at
by the
God's
way,
mercy. Okay.
Jonathan, you know why China hurried up to change the names of these Russian cities to Chinese? They were scared that they would be late, that Ukrainians will do that first and change all those names into Ukrainian. So then China would be more difficult to do
Oh,
it.
ooh. You're a cold man, Sasha.
Well, anyway, thank you so much for today's program again. All the best to everybody. And we'll see you Friday, same place, same time. Bye-bye,
Bye.
everybody.